Within JILA, the JEDI group, or JILA Excellence in Diversity and Inclusivity group, works to support DEI, or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity initiatives within the JILA community. The JEDI group is a self-nominated, cross-disciplinary team of JILA Fellows, staff, students, and postdocs dedicated to promoting diversity and advancing inclusivity through various educational programs and activities. Through these efforts, JILA seeks to create a welcoming environment within its walls and collaborate with the broader CU Boulder and NIST communities to further these values. To get a better look at JEDI, its history, and its goals, I sit down in an informal interview with Lauren Mason, the co-chair of the JILA JEDI group and the director of communications and operations at STROBE, an NSF Science and Technology Center directed by Professor Margaret Mernan with headquarters at JILA. Lauren has been at the forefront of JILA's diversity and inclusivity efforts, and her leadership has helped shape JEDI's impactful programs. In this episode, we'll be discussing the initiatives JEDI has undertaken, the challenges in advancing diversity within academic institutions, and the long-term vision for creating a more inclusive research environment. You're listening to Humans of JILA, a JILA podcast focusing on the human narrative of the institution's researchers. I'm your host and science communicator, Kenna Hughes-Castleberry. Every month, I tell the story of a researcher or group within JILA, showcasing the human sides behind the science. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like it on our YouTube channel or follow us on Spotify, and be sure to share it with your friends and family. This episode focuses on JEDI and the roles that diversity, equity, and inclusivity play within JILA. So whether you're a physics enthusiast, a current JILA member, part of JILA's vast alumni network, or considering JILA as the next step in your career, stay tuned as we dive into the ins and outs of JEDI. Let's begin our story. Well, thank you for joining me, Lauren. I love having conversations with you anyway, but this is just another excuse to chat with you. So I'm going to dive right in and ask you how JEDI was founded, because I know it was founded before I arrived, and how you originally got involved.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Kenna. It is an honor to be here. And, I love JEDI work and I love JILA. And so I'm excited to be talking about it today. Yeah. So JILA initially started JEDI as an idea from Eric Cornell and Margaret Mernan back in 2018. And that is initially when I got involved. I've been kind of involved since the beginning, working with different co-facilitators and, different projects within JILA.
I love it. I know I joined back in 2021. When I joined. And so, you had already gotten it well underway at that point. And so it was nice to join when I could, but I'm sad I missed the beginning, but also it sounded like it was a wonderful idea and we've taken it from there. So another question I have for you, Lauren, is when it comes to DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion work in STEM, there are a lot of issues that are happening in the field of physics historically and today. Can you elaborate on what some of those issues are?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question because it contextualizes the situation at JILA within the greater context of academia.
Yeah.
Because these issues are not just present within JILA, they're everywhere. Prevalent in academia and all STEM fields. And so while we do our best to address things that we can within JILA, there are things that can be out of our control in the larger academic context. So things that come up quite frequently in DEI work within JILA are having demographic representation that closer matches to what our societal demographics are. Along with that, if we increase our recruitment efforts, how do we retain people?
Right.
Because we can bring people in, but if it's not a positive environment for all people, then we end up losing really great people. And, things like conflict resolution it's super important for an organization. And every organization has conflicts, but if you don't have a way to address those, then it becomes a problem. And lack of accountability is also often something that comes up in DEI work. And so, these were all themes that came up when the external consultant that JILA worked with, Reagan Bird, did a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And she talked to the whole JILA community about what they perceive as the issues and what cultural and environmental areas they would like JILA DEI work to focus on. And so these were all common themes that came up in her work in talking to members of the entire community.
Yeah, I think to add maybe just from my own experience within DEI work, so I think lack of representation is really big. In fact, I think it was Margaret who actually at a talk said it wasn't going to be until the next century that there would be a 50% rate of women in physics, like it would be half and half. The next century. Sorry, let me just emphasize that really quick for a second.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is, so definitely lack of representation where people just don't see themselves in the field. And so they think, well, there's nobody that looks like me, so how can I make it work? But as you mentioned, you want to not only bring people in, but you want to retain them. You want to make the community so welcoming that they feel they can stay and feel safe to stay, right? And so I agree that is something that is a huge issue, not just within JILA, but in general in academia and industry, in all of the fields of physics and its various applications. That's something that people can work on. And so, yeah, it's very encouraging to know that these came up when Reagan did the SWOT analysis, and it is something that we are still pursuing today.
Yeah, absolutely. And, JILA can do our small piece of it in the larger context, but that has ripple effects. And we can inspire other organizations by being excellent in DEI as well as with our scientific research.
So my next question is what I think most people want to know when we're talking about DEI work and why DEI work is important. And so just from your perspective, why does a research institute need DEI and what does that mean?
Yeah, well, I think, JEDI is a mechanism to do meaningful and engaging work with the community that leads to real change. It's a way to address feedback and concerns from the community about the culture and climate and hopefully make improvements where needed and continue to try and do better in all that we're doing. And then also instigate actions that foster a greater sense of belonging for all members of the Institute. And I think that the projects that JEDI has worked on has really worked towards those goals.
Yeah. I want to maybe add to that I think DEI work is important because you need the diversity of perspectives as well. I think oftentimes it's very easy to just kind of go with the one-track mind of I think this is the way to do it, but it's really nice to bring in those differing perspectives. And so DEI work is one way to do that. But yeah, as you mentioned, we've done so many projects and so many interesting things already, and it's helped a lot, and I think good things will continue, I had to say.
Yeah, I think bringing in people from all walks of life changes the outcomes of the conversations and discussions and research because all those perspectives contribute to thinking about things in different ways, and that's only a good thing in science.
Yeah, absolutely. That segues perfectly into the next question I have, which is what sort of goals does JEDI have? And I know you and I have slightly different goals, being the two co-chairs, but I'd love to hear your goals, and I'm happy to share mine as well.
Well, I think, that's one of the beautiful things about JEDI and DEI is that we welcome everyone to be part of the committee, and we want to hear what everyone's ideas are and what their goals are. I love that we have different goals.
Yeah, me too.
And I love learning from everyone else what their high priorities are for JILA and the areas they would like to see change happen. And so, I think the main goal of JEDI is to work in collaboration for the good of the entire organization. And so deciding as a group where we want to take action and making those decisions at the group level is really important, and making sure all members of the Institute are represented. So having students, postdocs, faculty, and staff voices all included in our decisions and our goals and priorities. In the past, we have worked with an external consultant and experts in organizational development and leadership to do a SWOT analysis for JILA and do community interviews and figure out what the community cares about and where we have some work to do in regards to JEDI. Sort of out of that process of working with an external consultant, Reagan Bird, we started working on the JILA Values Project. And it's been really exciting because last December, for the first time, JILA adopted 6 organizational values: respect, collaboration, excellence, community, support, and curiosity. And that was a 2-year project that involved so much of our time and coordination.
So many people.
Yeah. It was primarily led by Professor Andreas Becker and then
Yes.
Beth Kroger, the former JILA Chief of Operations, and then us. But then, the team included members of all levels of JILA, which was really important and, took a lot of time and effort and discussion. And so the next step for the values project is to come to community agreements about how we all understand what each of these values mean and how we want to implement them at JILA. And so once we have that established, we'll be working on a JEDI action plan, which will include actions that we'll take for, areas of concern that have shown up in the Institute Culture Survey, the JILA Exit surveys, and feedback that we got during the Values Project. And it's great because people are so passionate about these things. And so harnessing all of that energy and beautiful work is just a lot of fun as a team.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I have similar goals as well for JEDI. And I know those are kind of the next steps for us as well, for the Institute as a whole. I think the values to behavior translation will be especially interesting because we had so many inputs during the values project about why do we need values? And is this just going to be a list of words and not really mean anything? And I think for both you and I, the organization, and just everybody, values to behaviors really adds some meaning to those values. Not that they didn't have meaning already, but it shows what respect looks like. It shows how to enact curiosity. And so, of course, we want to have those in place so people know, oh, this is, respectful behavior. I want to reward that. I want to encourage that in my institute. And so, yeah, I'm excited for that, too. I think that'll be wonderful. And, the other goals of the JEDI Action Plan, bettering our community. We have so many projects that we've discussed in the past with JEDI, whether it's our anti-racism statement or onboarding process, the exit survey. There's just so many places to have DEI work within the Institute. And I know I'm very much looking forward to that. I know a lot of people are. And as you mentioned, people are very passionate about it, which makes me really happy. And we want those passions. We want your input. We want your interests in helping us and working alongside us so we can better our community. So
yeah, and so many great discussions have come out of this work too.
Yes.
How do we have an institute that has the highest level of excellence and rigor in our research, that also has a supportive culture and climate where people feel welcome and that they belong, but with the good kind of stress that helps people move forward into new scientific discoveries, but in a supportive and welcoming environment.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You can't have the best of both worlds, right? It is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. That kind of leads into my next question, which is, what is it like being a co-chair? And this is when you can complain about working with me if you want. You don't have to, but
no complaints at all.
I would love to know what, from your perspective, it's like being the co-chair of JEDI.
Well, I love being co-chair of JEDI because you get to work with all sorts of different people within JILA and people who I might not normally work with. And I get to hear so many different perspectives about people's experiences and what they would like to see. And so I'm constantly learning from everyone. And, I think being part of a collaboration like this is really meaningful for me. I'm very passionate about people and culture and environment. And so, it's just a joy for me. And I've loved getting to know you and work with you and also learn about, really about leadership through DEI and how we have done that collaboratively through JILA.
Yeah, I just have to echo those comments because I also love working with you and learning from you. And, I've mentioned this off mic before, but you've just given me so much wisdom personally that I've just taken to heart and learned from and been inspired by. But yeah, also just working with so many people in the Institute who are passionate about making this Institute the best it can be. It really just makes me fulfilled. It makes me feel happy. I know I'm in the right place, just like everybody else. It's also just one for me where, we have so many individuals who want this, right? We're all on the same page and we all feel fulfilled. And I think it's one too where the Institute, it can be so easy to be in our own little bubbles, in our own little spaces. I'm only in this department or I only work in this shop. And so working at JEDI allows you to work with everyone and get a better picture of the Institute, I think, as a whole, and meet new people, make new connections, that sort of thing. It's wonderful.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I love the co-chair model because I
Yes.
think that, having two people lead is already making it a collaborative process, but we can help remind each other and see each other's blind spots and do that in a really loving way. And so, the outcome is just so much better when we work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've learned so much from you too. I'm
always learning.
Yeah, that's the best way to be. Yeah.
Absolutely. Agreed. So I guess going back to like the bigger kind of questions about DEI, just from your experience, and I know you've done a lot of research on DEI and a lot of background already in this field, what are some techniques or behaviors that someone can adopt to promote DEI in their workplace, whether that's here at JILA or at a different workplace or just around them in general?
Yeah, well, I think if you don't have the time to do diversity, equity, and inclusion work in terms of like being on the committee and dedicating your time in that way, I think supporting DEI initiatives that the committee and everyone is working on is really important. So naming your support and showing up when you can, when there's surveys or community events or things like that, it can go a long way. And personally, I think self-development is a huge part of DEI in terms of developing your own self-awareness and then awareness of others. So a lot of social intelligence, emotional intelligence topics can go a long way with working well in a team, which, you need at JILA, and then you also need wherever you go next.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And so the more that you develop yourself and get to know yourself and how you work well with others and support positive outcomes is really, really helpful for DEI work. And, I also think part of that is that kindness and encouragement are incredible motivators. And I think they're directly linked to people feeling a sense of belonging to an organization, to their group, and to even, their career.
Yeah. I was trying to think of a good way to put my thoughts, but I think you have said things so eloquently that I'm trying to come up with something that sounds just as good, and I can't. But just to add to that, I think some other techniques that people can use is, if you are part of a demographic that isn't necessarily prejudiced against, I think that gives you an opportunity to be an ally and to speak up for your other colleagues that may have experienced microaggressions or other prejudices and just say, hey, that's not okay. Like, we can do better, right? It takes just one person and it takes just one conversation to start that. And yeah, that can be really, I think, uncomfortable for a lot of people because they're just not used to maybe being an ally, but I think it's something that we could all strive to be. So that would be one technique I would recommend. I think another one, as you mentioned, like the kindness and encouragement is really key too. Like just treating people like people, and not to say that we don't, but just checking in with people instead of just, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. Like actually getting to know people better, I think can just pay you dividends in the end because A, you have a larger network and you can use those people later on for letters of recommendation or even just friendship, right? But also just you then also get to learn more about people in general. You get to learn how people think, how they work, what it's like being in a community. I think those are all positive things. So yeah, I would agree with all of your statements, but just to add a couple of my own.
Yeah. I love what you shared. And, something else that came to mind while you were talking is connecting people with other groups and resources. Like one example that comes to mind is the Women and Gender Minority in Physics group.
Yeah.
Finding your people is a great way to have support both within and outside of your research group or your staff group or, wherever you happen to be. So connecting yourself with those resources and then others, the way that we get through is by helping each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. We can't do it on our own.
Yeah. And working together for positive change so that maybe there would be less underrepresentation for women and people of color and, folks with disabilities, all sorts of marginalized communities within STEM.
Agreed. Well, that leads into my last question for you, Lauren, which is how can one get involved in JEDI? Whether that's, if I'm a student and I want to learn more about JEDI or I'm an alumni member, how can I get involved?
Yeah, I think I love that question. And, I think the best way right now to get involved is to come to our next meetings. We're going to have a couple of meetings this semester at least, and talk about JEDI and where we're headed next with the JILA Values Project and creating an action plan. And we want to hear from everyone about what their priorities are. And if you're passionate about working on something, let us know and we will work to get you the resources and get that project off the ground, because we would love to support you in creating positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're an alumni member or even a member of our community, feel free to donate to our fund if you'd like. You certainly don't have to, but that's also one way to support us. But yeah, as Lauren mentioned, getting involved in the actual community, having these discussions, so important. And we'd love to hear from you. So, well, thank you for chatting with me, Lauren. That was such a wonderful discussion.
It was. It's always great to chat with you, Kenna.
Thank you for listening to Humans of JILA, a JILA podcast. Be sure to subscribe to JILA's YouTube channel or Spotify channel for more information and to keep listening to these episodes. This episode featured an interview with Lauren Mason, co-chair of the JILA JEDI Group and Director of Communications and Operations at Strobe, an NSF Science and Technology Center directed by Professor Margaret Renan with headquarters at JILA. If you'd like to donate to the JILA JEDI Fund, you can find the donation form at www.giveto.colorado.edu/campaigns/50245/donations/new and search for the JILA JEDI in the search bar. Production design, sound design, and research by Kenna Hughes-Castleberry, with assistance from JILA's Science Communication Office and Lauren Mason. Sounds and music by Pixabay and Kevin MacLeod. JILA is a joint institute between NIST and the University of Colorado Boulder. JILA hosts this podcast. Any use of this podcast without JILA's permission or credit is prohibited.